Hello everyone, welcome to our RBD Block Challenge for 2026. Can you believe this is our 6th sew-along? We love this annual event and I am so excited to sew along with you. If this quilt behind me intimidates you, just know I'm going to take you through step by step each block. We're so excited to introduce 16 individual blocks that are designed by our amazing RBD designers. So this one starts out with Lori Holt. This is what block number 1 looks like. It's called Four Corners, and this is what it looks like in our confetti cottons, and this is what it looks like in our batiks. We have fabric requirements for both of these blocks. So whatever you're choosing to sew with, we're glad you're sewing with us. So let's talk about the pattern. If you are not new to the sew along, you know we have a Facebook group, an exclusive RBD Block Challenge Facebook group where you can post your blocks. There's a lot of encouragement that goes on the Facebook group, as well as places to find supplies if you're having a hard time finding supplies. But the other thing, if you are new to this challenge, let me take you through what you need to do to get started on this first block. Under our website, under free content, we have all of our patterns for the sew along. And this first sew along is called block number 1, Four Corners. So it's a free download on the Riley Blake Designs website. It's 2 pages, front and back, and it takes you through step by step of cutting instructions and sewing instructions. But I'm going to give you my tips and tricks in making this block, because sometimes it can be intimidating. We have such a beautiful quilt behind me that sometimes that can be overwhelming, because it's kind of a sampler quilt, because each block is unique. And we're going to get started on block number 1. So like always, I lay all my pieces out on a design board. This design board's designed by Lori Holt, and these are the handy stickers I talked about in Set to Sew. And the stickers are really excellent for marking your blocks and keeping everything organized. So all my pieces are cut out, and we're going to get started. Now the first thing it tells you to do in the instructions, I'm going to put on my glasses, is to take your rectangular strips, and we're going to strip piece this together. So you can start with B, and it's going to go to G, and you're just going to straight stitch down 1/4 inch. Now if you're new to quilting, you got to make sure you have a very accurate 1/4 inch. In fact, before you can, there's specialty foot for 1/4 inches, and you can just measure it and make sure that your foot is accurate. That's going to be super important. The next thing, I just want to talk for a second about thread. Last year we partnered with Wonderfil on a high quality thread. It's an 80 weight, has very low lint, so that's why I love it so much, and it's a dream to sew with. And I decrease my stitch length to 1.85. You can do 2.0, but if you like a tight stitch length, I decrease my stitch length. And the other thing I like to do is do a temporary heat adhesive. Instead of pinning this, if you're new to quilting, it's a-okay to pin this, but if your pressing station is very close, I just come over to my pressing station, and especially for strip piecing, it's nice to give a nice press, and you have this temporary heat adhesive, and you take it to your machine, you've measured, you know you have a nice 1/4 inch, and you're ready to sew. And we just start sewing, we don't backstitch. No backstitching in quilting. All right, let's take it to our pressing station, and we're going to press this open like this. and I'm pressing to the dark side. I just take my tip of my iron, and then you can go follow it up with a clapper behind you. Now these clappers are really excellent for giving you flat seams. And it does that. You can use starch if you want. I'm choosing not to. If you use starch or water, it will absorb that, and it also absorbs the heat and gives you really flat seams. Okay, so that's pressed. The next thing we're going to do is take F, and F is on the other side of that white piece, and I'm going to bring this back over here, and you can pin it. If it's easier for you to pin, go ahead and pin. I'm going to do a temporary heat adhesive and just line that up. Make sure that's lined up. And I didn't mention this before, but this Seam Sew Easy guide by Lori Holt is excellent. You've got a 1/4 inch foot, but if you also have this Seam Sew Easy guide, you can line up your fabrics to your feed dogs and your foot, and that's a really good gauge as well. So we're going to put that right there. All right, let's take it back to our pressing station. And then we're just going to press to the dark side. All right, let's bring it back here. And now we're going to cut our sections. Now this should be 3.5, so we can kind of measure that. Should be 3.5, and if it's not measuring 3.5, you need to check to make sure you're not taking too big of a seam, because top and bottom should be 3.5. But the other length, you want 4.5. So I'm going to just trim off the end because they don't line up perfectly. I'm going to trim that off, flip it over here, and we're going to do 4.5 inch sections. And 4 of them. Okay, we'll just toss that. So these units fit right here on the quilt block. So those are ready to go. The next thing we're going to work on are these 4 half square triangles. Now, many times you can do the 2 at a time method and sometimes even 4 at a time method, but Lori Holt prefers to do 1 at a time method. And since this is Lori Holt's quilt block, we're going to do the 1 at a time half square triangles. So you are going to have 4 of these D squares and 4 of these C squares. And we're going to make 1 at a time. Now you can get your 1/4 inch plus ruler and mark corner to corner. This is a super handy ruler. But if you've got Lori Holt's Seam Sew Easy guide, you can actually use the Seam Sew Easy guide to line up your points and skip the step of marking corner to corner. But if you don't have a Seam Sew Easy guide, mark corner to corner 4, and I usually do it on the lighter piece. Now you're going to put these together, and this is going to be your sew line. So you're going to sew directly on this line. And we're going to chain piece these, which means we're going to sew one right after the other, and it's a really handy method to chain piece. So we'll have those all lined up. And if you want to do a temporary heat adhesive, you can do that as well, but these are lined up pretty well. So let's take it to the machine, and we're going to sew down that corner to corner. I'll show you how to use the Seam Sew Easy guide if you're not familiar with how to use that. All right, okay, let's line that up. All right, this one is not marked. You put the tip right there at the tip of your last little squares right there, and you're gonna line it up to the bottom of the Seam Sew Easy Guide. Now this hangs off a little off the edge, but you can, just eyeball it and move it a little bit forward. And then you can see right here that we're sewing on this corner, and then we've got this Seam Sew Easy Guide lined up on the bottom there. And we just feed that through. We get our other block ready. Okay, let's bring it back here. You know what's really handy? So this is our little bee cutter. It's a thread cutter. You can clip your threads in between, but I love this little thread cutter on top of the machine because it makes it quick and easy to clip your thread. So that's not something that you have to have, but it sure is nice to have that thread cutter. Now I'm going to take my 1/4 inch plus ruler and trim down to a 1/4 inch. And you do have scraps. You can save them for another project or put them in your sewing bin or trash. And you can go ahead and press these open, or you can wait to your other blocks, but I'm gonna press them open right now. And I always tend to press to the dark side. And sometimes you just warm up your stitches real quick, and then the fabrics just kind of flop open. Put it under this clapper. It's nice to have a couple different clapper options. Okay, let's bring it back here. I'm gonna get my rotating mat. This is a Sue Daily rotating mat. And we're gonna trim these blocks, make sure they are 3.5 inches. And they should be spot on. That looks really great. So just make sure they're all 3.5 inches. I have just the slightest bit to trim right there, but sometimes it matters, right? Okay, those are good to go. I'm just gonna put those down there. Those corner units are done. Now let's move on to the flying geese units, those right there. We're gonna start with this flying geese, and then we'll move to this center block right there. So you've got these cute little A rectangles, and then we're gonna need some H squares right here, okay? And we're going to take these. Now, on the pattern, it's gonna tell you to mark these corner to corner. And if you're new to quilting and new to flying geese, I would recommend you do that. So you're gonna mark corner to corner with a mechanical pencil or a friction pen that disappears when you press it. And I would probably do them all at once. Not one. Do all your squares at once. But if you have a Seam Sew Easy Guide, you can kind of skip this step. There's only 4 of these. And we're gonna be chain piecing these all together. So I just kind of line them up like this and take it to the machine. If you want to give them a quick press, you can do that. Sometimes that's super helpful. Or if you want to throw a pin in it. Okay, those are nice and hot, ready to go. Just one more. Okay, here we go. Now, when I am doing my flying geese, if you've got this line right here, I just go ever so slightly just to the side of the line, or just like right on it, but to the outside a little bit. So when your stitches, when you fold that back, it will open up into a perfect edge of a rectangle. So I'm stitching on the line, but maybe just a skosh to the outside, just the tiniest bit. Now that one's marked, and you sew on the line, but just ever so slightly, just right to the side of it, to the outside. I'm going to do the same thing. This is an unmarked. You line up the tip to where the tip of the needle is, and then do you see the center line on the Seam So Easy guide? I'm going to use that center line and just just walk this fabric, just guide it through my machine. And then line up the next one. You can clip those threads on our little bee cutter. All right, let's take it over here, and we are going to trim down to 1/4 inch. If you've done flying geese, this is like a piece of cake for you. But if you're new to flying geese, it just takes a minute to get these made. Okay, now we're going to take it to our pressing station, and we're going to open up. So flip and turn. Flip and press method. So I'll open up like that. And do you see my stitching? Since I was sewing on the line, but maybe just a hair to the outside of the line. But look, what we want is this continuous rectangle, and that's exactly what we want. So let's go press these little units. Okay, look at these little units. Now this is the one side of the flying geese. That flying geese is going to make that shape. So we add this on the other side. And of course it's going to cross that fabric right there. So we've got our line. So if you've drawn corner to corner, this is going to make a V right here. And these are not drawn on. We just have to remember where we're starting and where we're stopping. There we go. We have a couple extra. We'll put those over there. And again, you can, if your pressing station is right next to your sewing station, I really do like a temporary heat adhesive. But you got to be fast, right? You got to be fast. I'll do that one there too. Okay. All right. You can sew from the middle, or you can flip and sew to the outside. I usually like to sew in the middle. It's your choice. Make sure that is lined up. Oh, and it just shifted ever so slightly. You can readjust. Clip our threads. Now we just trim down. To a 1/4 inch. Okay, let's take it to our pressing station. This is what we want to open up and see. I'm just going to press them all at once to get those threads warmed up, and then open them up. There we go. Okay, so take a look at that. It's nice and hot right there. What we want to see is that beautiful pointing flying geese, and then we want a 1/4 inch from the edge. And we are just going to measure these, and they should be 2.5 inches across, so we can grab this little 2.5 inch square up ruler, and we could just make sure, and it's 1.5 inch top to bottom. That's looking good. And we just make sure it's lined up. What you don't want to do, I want to make sure I have a 1/4 inch from the tip to the end, and anything above that, I just kind of like just trim. You hardly need to trim. I don't need to trim there. And side to side, make sure that's good. These are hairs. These are just so hardly anything to trim. Let's take one last look at this. Okay, those are good to go, our 4 flying geese. The next thing we're going to work on is our 2.5 inch square. I think, and I've got some other 1/2 square triangles, so I skipped my other 1/2 square triangles, so we can do those other 1/2 square triangles, which are the J squares. We have 4 of the J squares, and we're going to pair them with these cream squares. And again, if you want to trace this corner to corner, go ahead and do that. But I'm going to use my Seam So Easy guide. I'll do one for you. If you're new to quilting, it's probably best for you to trace them out to get you in the mode. Okay, I'm going to sew these, and right on the line, take into the machine. We'll line it up. 1/2 square triangles, here we go. And we're going to go right down to the corner. Okay, let's clip these really fast. We're going to trim down. And then I'm going to press these. Okay, let's press these open. And again, I'm pressing to the dark side. Oh, I'm going to heat my stitches up. And these are just really little 1/2 square triangles. Okay, let's bring it over here, and these should measure 1.5 inches. In fact, I have a better ruler that I love to use because it's 1.5 inch wide. This is ever so slightly under that. So just remember that. You might have to tug just like a couple hairs, but overall it looks pretty good. Okay, one more. Yeah, that looks just ever so slightly. I'm going to just trim right there. Okay. Hardly needed it, but there you go. So those are ready to go. Again, those usually come right after these. I just kind of flipped my page over and moved on to my flying geese. But now we're ready to work on the last unit, which is the square and square. It's also called an economy block. And so grab your I and your E squares. Your E squares are these little pink squares. And again, if it helps you to mark, I think I dropped my mechanical pencil, mark them corner to corner, especially if this is the first time you've ever done an economy block. Oh, make sure you've got an accurate line. It's not shifting on you. That's kind of shifting on me. Okay, here we go. Okay, so we're going to take these squares. I'm going to line that up there on that corner, that right angle right there. And you're going to line that opposite corners. And this is your sew line. So you're sewing parallel on both sides, okay? So the last thing you want to do is sew this side of the line. You would rather just sew just a skosh to the outside of that line. Just when you flip that back, it's going to make a perfect square with this square right there. I'll show you what I mean. So let's take the machine. And again, you could line this up on your Seam So Easy guide. But if you're new to quilting, I'm just going to give it a quick sew this way, flip it over. And we are going to sew down the other side. Okay, just give it a little check. Looks good. Let's trim down to our 1/4 inch. Well, down to the seam. 1/4 inch from the seam, right? This is what it looks like. Let's take it to our pressing station. You could finger press that open, but I like to give it a good press. Warm those stitches up. There we go, right like that. That's what that looks like. Then we're going to take the other squares, and they are going to be opposite, across from each other like that. Do you see that? And we're going to sew on the line on each side. Super helpful if you've got your cutting station right next to your sewing station and your pressing station. We're going to open that up. So let's press that and let's open it up like that. Let's give it a press for a minute. Sometimes if it pops up, I just add a little starch. Give it a good press. Let it cool for just a second and bring it back. Now this should be 2.5 inches square, and you've got your little 2.5 inch ruler right here. What we want to see is your points inside of this aqua line, because that's your seam. It's looking good. I'm just going to show you how it's ever so slightly out right there. Just make sure you're not pulling it over here, but I'm going to trim that ever so slightly. And sometimes these, it doesn't matter, but these little blocks, it can add up. So I'm just trimming it. There we go. Oh, and I'm going to clip that thread right there too. Okay, we have all of our units sewn. It's time to start assembling our block. So let's start with the center of our block. It gives you instructions of laying it out like this. We've got our half square triangles in the corners. And then we've got our flying geese. They are flying away from our block. So make sure the tips aren't going towards the center. They're flying away like this. And this is what's fun. You get to see the pattern within the pattern, right? Okay, now I'm going to start assembling this. I'm going to flip it this way, and I'm going to tell you why. So I'm going to flip it this direction, and I chain piece this. I don't cut my threads in between, but I want to see this tip right here that I don't sew over the tip and cut off my point. So I'm going to flip it in this direction. And you can use this design board to bring it over to your machine, and you're going to sew down the side, not clipping or stopping in between each of these units. We're just going to sew right down. Okay, bring this over to your design board. You're going to open it up like this. Take a look. That's looking good. What we don't want to see is that point cut off. It's right there at the point. I'm going to flip it this direction. On all these units, I'm not cutting my threads in between, and so you will want to pin. On this side. So I'm going to line that up. There we go. Pin here. And that pin generally reminds me where to start my stitches when I'm going down this side. And then I make sure, check that again. Check that again. So I'm going to just check that again, open it up, okay. That looks good, and that looks good, okay. So I'm going to flip it. Generally I don't, I just sew down one side, but I want to watch this point when I'm sewing so I don't cut off my point. So I'm going to, it gets a little fiddly, but take all 3 units over to your machine like this. All right, let's take this back. Again, it's really little, looking good. See my points right there? It's exactly what I want to see. We just have 2 more seams for this center section. So we're gonna nest our seams here. This wants to fold out, so I'm gonna fold this section with the flying geese in, and we're gonna take our little bird pins and just nest those seams right there. And we're going to flip that in. If it's easier to press this, then take it to your pressing station. And if you get a little, if they're not lining up perfectly when you sew, just give it a little tug, and you can make them line up perfectly. Let's fold the other side again. This is going to fold inside, and you're just locking those 2 seams in place opposite of each other. There's a lot of bulk that's coming together right there. So we're just locking those in place and pinning them. Okay, let's go sew those 2 seams. Okay, let's take this to the pressing station. Let's open it up. Doesn't that look so good? Okay, we're gonna give an overall press with it closed. Warm up those stitches. Then we're gonna open it up. One side, then another. I might just give it a little starch. I love how this center block looks. It's so pretty. Okay, take a look. That was a quick look, right? I'm gonna press this with the quilter's clapper, and yeah, let's take a look. This is what we wanna see. We wanna see the square around that square. So we actually created another square. Now this should measure 4.5 inches square. So you can take your other little cute cut square up ruler and take a look. And everything's lining up. These points are lining up, and it's a good size. It may just ever so slightly be pulled in, but that's no problem at all, because you can just stretch that when you're sewing that together. So now we're ready to assemble our block. I'm gonna put these away and look at the layout and the pattern. Got all of these handy stickers. You can reuse those or toss them. These corners, all the pink, the darker pink goes towards the center. We've got our center block right here. And then it looks like the blue goes next to there. There we go. Doesn't that look good? Now I'm going to assemble this all together just like we did in this center section. And again, because I want to see my point, I want that on top. So I'm going to flip the center over to the side like that. And that lines up great. They're both 4.5 inches, so that's really lining up well. You can put a pin on the top if you find that helpful. But this is what I'm going to sew down the side like this. And again, being mindful of this point right here, just being a little bit to the outside of that point. So let's take it to the machine and sew. If one of your fabrics is slightly smaller, then I would pin it. This is slightly smaller. I'm going to put a pin right here. And you're just going to do that tug to pull it into place. Do you see that? I'm going to tug that. Let's see, I'm going to pull that right like that. Okay, let's take this back to our design board, open things up, take a look. This is exactly what we want to see. We want to see that tip right here, close to the edge, not being cut off. And now we flip these over on the other side. But I'm going to move my design board around because I am going to So this side, I'm going to flip it over. So I'm going to pin here. Actually, I'm going to pin from the back side. You'll see why, because I'm sewing from the other side. Pin here. And pin here. Again, you bring this all together because I didn't clip my threads in between. I'm going to flip it over here, and I'm going to sew down this side. Okay, let's take this back to the design board. Everything's connected with threads, and I just like how that keeps my project together, and that's why I don't clip in between. And now we just have 2 final seams. Take a look. This is what we want to see, because you have these points on these half square triangles you don't want cut either. So when you're sewing from the other side, you can look at those too. So there's 3 points you're kind of concerned with. So we're going to flip that over like that. And now we're going to pin, more pinning on these 2 final seams, because this is where our intersection is. And I'm going to flip. This wants to go that direction. Again, I'm going to nest my seams. So I'm pinning at that intersection right here. And then I'm going to pin, and that's going to go in. There we go. Nesting those seams right there. And if you want to call out these points where you're supposed to be paying attention, you can put a little pin there. I think that's fine. So you're paying extra attention to those points so you don't sew over those points. But maybe if it doesn't bother you to sew over the points, then that's fine. I'm just teaching you my tips and tricks to not sew over points. Okay, and I do pin this other seam at the very same time. So I'm getting my whatever tips you find helpful that I'm sharing, use them. If you don't find them helpful, then that's okay too. So these are ready to be sewn, both my sides. I just kind of pull back each side like that. And then I do lay this on top like we discussed. Let's sew our last 2 seams. Okay, let's sew the other side. Okay, let's open it up. Let's take a look. It's looking good, right? Let's go press it at our pressing station. And I do press from the back. I'm going to use a little water mist. I like spray starch. I also like water mist. I don't necessarily steam a lot. But put in the comments if you like to steam, water mist, starch, what's your preference? Then I open that up. It's the big reveal, right? This is what we want to see. Our points right there, our point right there, not cut off. We worked really hard on those points, didn't we? Okay, I get this big old clapper. It's perfect for these size blocks. And take a look at that. Doesn't that look amazing? The last thing we have to do is square up the block to 10.5 inches. It will be 10 finished once it's sewn in the quilt, but the 10.5 inch square is what we want to trim it to. And so when you use this trim it ruler, you can line up all your seams. So if you want everything lined up with this square with all your points on the inside of this seam. So do you see how I'm lining this up? I really just have some threads on the outside edge, not much at all. And hopefully you're just not doing a lot of trimming. But look, the Four Corners quilt block is finished. This is a beautiful quilt block designed by Lori Holt. I can't wait to see what she does with her own fabrics when this quilt block is going to be beautiful. So this is block number 1. If this is the first time you've ever done this challenge, you can do it. I'm going to take you through step by step, and you're going to make that beautiful quilt behind me. If you've done a challenge before, welcome back. We're going to have a great time this year in 2026, sewing along with me and our community, our Riley Blake Designs community. So join me next time for block number 2 for Spin Around by Amy Smart. See you next time.